time has expired. Senator Fawcett.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. In rising to take note of the answers and particularly the comments that have just been made by members opposite, I'd like to deal with the issues of rhetoric versus fact. And if you want to understand why the ALP is full of rhetoric at the moment, just look at the front page of today's paper, which highlights that the opposition leader has been out advocating that people rise up and oppose the measures in this budget when the budget hasn't actually been issued. And so it goes back to the days where Mr Shorten said, whatever Ms Gillard said, I agree. Now he's saying, whatever Joe Hockey says, the Treasurer says in his budget, let's disagree. And so you see very clearly that so much of what is being said is merely rhetoric. Let's go to look at some of the facts. And there's two key facts that are really pertinent to this argument. First off, the structure of Australia's parliamentary and budgetary system, which appears to be completely ignored in the rhetoric that is being used by the ALP, and then second, the facts of the actual figures. So to go to the first point, we have a process that is known as the Ford estimates. Now, to take it to an extreme, if you try to estimate over 100 years and say in 100 years' time we're going to promise you this payment or this return, people would say you're having a lend. You can't estimate in 100 years' time what economic circumstances are going to be like, what ore mining prices are going to be like. And so is that 90 years, 80 years? How far do you go out? Well, traditionally what Australia has done is we have set a limit of 4 years, the Ford estimates, as the time frame that governments say we have reliable estimates about income and expenditure, and that becomes things that are funded in the Ford estimates. That's the only reliable framework which both sides of politics in Australia have used to actually make reliable decisions, announcements for which they are going to be held accountable. That's why, when under the Gillard government they started making promises of funding that went out 5, 6 years or beyond, any serious student of Australian politics said they're unfunded. Those are not serious commitments because they are unfunded. They go outside the factual basis of how governments of both persuasions in this nation have always made budgetary commitments. So let's look at the other group of facts, because this goes and completely sets to lie the claim that there have been cuts to health funding. Now, in South Australia, and I'm a senator for South Australia, and clearly I'm interested in the case there. So let's look at the 13-14 budget, which is the last budget under the Gillard government, or the Rudd-Gillard government. There was $983.3 million in hospital services, $23.1 million in public health, so just over $1 billion. Well, in the 14-15 budget, it's $1.07 billion to health, and over the Ford estimates, by the time we get to the 17-18 budget, it's $2.188 billion. Now, I didn't major in maths at university, but my maths is not so bad that when I compare 1.07 to 2.188, it's very obvious that that is a continuous rise. And in fact, the hospital funding for South Australia has gone up 9% in the first year, 9% the second year, 9% the next year, 6% the year after that. And sorry, that's the overall budget for Australia for funding. So a total increase of some $5.3 billion, or 40%, over the 4 years of the Ford estimates. And so the argument that is being put forward that the coalition government is cutting funding for health is a sheer fabrication. And the ALP can have all the rhetoric they like, but the facts tell us that the way we measure budgetary commitments is the Ford estimates. It has ever been thus. And the facts tell us that the money which has been committed by this government is increasing by the tune of 40% over that 4 years. And, Mr Deputy Speaker, I make the point this is not unusual for a coalition government. The Museum of Australian Democracy, which looks back at the key achievements of government, said that one of the key achievements of the Howard government, when Prime Minister Abbott was then the Health Minister, was the record investment in health funding in 06-07. At that time it was $47.6 million but it indicates that despite the rhetoric of the ALP, the Coalition show by their actions that we support investment in health for Australians.